Hey, it's Ace, and if you haven't heard, the brand new Ace at Large podcast comes out every Thursday. And what the Ace at Large podcast is built around these days is the idea that you are not alone. Whatever you may be going through, whatever you may be dealing with, you are not alone. And what we need for the podcast is you. We need your stories, your ideas, your concepts. Tell us how you overcame something. Tell us what you dealt with in life and how you conquered it, because the idea is what you've dealt with in the past is going to make it easier for someone else to deal with whatever it is they might be going through. And that's something special. So you've got all the information down here below me on the screen. Contact me. Tell me about your story. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about what you've overcome. And we'll see if we can't provide others with the help that they need. All right. It's the Ace at Large podcast, available every Thursday. And I would love to hear from you.
This is the Radio Button Network. And this is the new Ace at Large podcast. Ace at Large podcast. Now, your host, Ace.
Perseverance. We come here every week and we talk about how we're going to work through things, what's happening in life. But how important is perseverance? How important is it to just keep coming back when it feels like you can't keep coming back? I have been excited for weeks to share this lady's story with you today. Because when you think of all the things that you've been through and all the things you've experienced in life, and we talked last week about how sometimes it feels like you're standing at the bottom of the mountain and you see the avalanche coming and you just can't get out of the way and you feel like you're going to be overrun. How do you keep coming back when you feel like that just keeps happening to you? That's what today is all about, because this is a lady who has been through so many different things in life. One thing after the other. Sometimes it's the same thing more than once that keeps coming back at her. And now she stands at the point of hopefully, finally beginning to emerge from all of that and her true talent being shown. So anytime you think, I just can't go anymore, I just can't do anymore, hopefully this edition of the Ace at Large podcast is the thing that's going to make you realize, you know what? I can get up and go one more day. I can keep putting one foot in front of the other a little bit longer. And hopefully in the process, we're going to turn you on to some badass country music at the same time. Because my guest today for the Ace at Large podcast is Jennifer Lauren from the band Diamonds and Whiskey. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I don't really know where we should start, so I guess we start at the beginning, because your story takes so many different twists and turns. And we're going to get into your music. She's got a brand new single that's out today, kind of the first single from her forthcoming album. The single is called Backcountry Voodoo. It's available everywhere now, all streaming platforms. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, because it's an achievement in and of itself as you kind of begin to climb out and through all of the stuff that you've been through in life. But let's start in the beginning. As a child, what's the first thing that kind of began being problematic for you?
Well, gosh, like a lot of families, my parents divorced when I was 2, and it was a pretty ugly childhood, if you will.
Yeah.
And that began when I was very young, and so a lot of the normal things a lot of kids go through, but probably to an extreme with parents that fought a lot. But I would say the biggest thing that happened was when I was 12, I got really sick. And that came from a tick bite. And at the time, we didn't know. And so that was like extremely difficult because we couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I began throwing up all the time. And then, arthritis set in. And, I couldn't hold my head up in class. And so I spent most of my middle school and high school years plagued by a disease we couldn't find.
That's the thing that gets me. It's middle school and high school. Mm-hmm. And today, a lot of times people that type of thing, people kind of know more about Lyme disease, which is what it turned out to be.
Right.
So at the age of 12, essentially, you acquired Lyme disease, but they didn't get it right for
13 years. Yeah.
For 13 years.
Yeah.
So for 13 years, and these other things are going to come in. This is kind of the foundation. You were battling Lyme disease until you were 25 years old.
Yeah. So at first they told my parents it was in my head, because maybe I just needed attention.
That always makes you feel great.
Yeah, it does. But as a straight A student and an all-star athlete, it didn't really make sense, because I had everything going for me at the time, very talented, that sort of thing. But yeah, it just got worse and worse and worse. And on into my 20s, it was so bad that I'd lost the use of my legs and had lost my vision and hearing on my right side. And my liver and heart were failing. And after 32 different doctors, my mother finally took me to one, and they figured out what it was. They happened to
It,
be from up north. Yeah.
it took 32 doctors to figure out it was Lyme disease.
Yes. Yeah, but it's not prominent in
And
the
again,
South.
I'll
Yeah.
repeat a lot of this stuff because if you're kind of keeping score at home, it's going to get even crazier. But think about that. Between the ages of 12 and 25, she battled this. And again, lost the use of your legs, lost
Hearing
total,
and sight. Yeah, on my right side.
okay,
Yeah.
total vision and sight on your right side. And then eventually they figured out, they got the right diagnosis that it was Lyme disease, which though still is something you deal with to this day. Just because they figured
Right.
it out doesn't mean it goes away.
No, in fact, I thought, oh, I finally have a diagnosis. I'll take the antibiotics and be better. But that's not what happened. So I've spent the last 10 years with 6 different PIC lines and ports and IV antibiotics over and over and over and being just super sick to get to this point,
Right.
So
So this is the best you felt,
yeah, yeah. So
even now with PIC lines and ports and all
yeah.
that. You still have to go regularly to have that dealt with, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. But definitely getting better.
So you got Lyme disease,
Mhm.
which people have heard of, they know a lot about, and then on top of that, cancer comes into play.
Yeah. So I guess it's been about a year and a half ago. I I didn't know I had thyroid cancer or carcinoma at the time. 2 growths had formed, and yeah, so cancer happened, and I felt really weak and was super sick through that, and that became a battle last year. So it was a lot all at
Yeah.
once,
So
and my Lyme disease had flared at the same time.
so you're dealing with, at the same time you're dealing with cancer, you're also dealing with a flare up of your Lyme. Did cancer cause the flare up in Lyme disease, or the treatment cause the flare up in the Lyme disease?
But yeah, but really, Lyme disease flares up when stress suppresses your immune
Okay.
system. So anything that stresses you out just causes these flare ups, and you feel like you can't walk.
Yeah. So you've got Lyme disease and cancer. And then let's throw in not one but 2 car accidents.
Yeah, so I had the cancer removed from my neck and my thyroid removed. Was in the hospital for a little while and was driving home actually after my hospital stay, and had a head-on collision basically with another vehicle. It wasn't my fault, but yeah, and then that caused me to have surgery on my foot, which I had to wait for 8 months because of COVID. So I was on crutches and in a boot for
Okay.
basically that long.
So again, you got cancer, and you're battling cancer and Lyme disease. On the way home from the surgery, from having your thyroid and all removed, and your cancer treatment, on the way home from the hospital, you're hit head on.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment that you just sat there and cried? Like, this is just too much.
Yeah, I remember, right after that, and finally getting home from the hospital from that, and just feeling like, whew, I don't know if I can get back up. It's just, you're just kind of over it sometimes. You're just
Because
over it all.
on top of that, there's one other thing that was kind of circling around the top of all of this, which is
I divorced
Yeah.
at the time, and I'd filed for separation before that, and when you're going through heartache, and right at the time I'd filed was when I found out I had cancer, and so yeah, I've been fighting that all year, and it's just it was just a lot all at once.
I mean,
Yeah.
and we're talking about all of this stuff is in the last
That was 2020 basically.
Yeah. in the last year, as if the Lyme disease stuff wasn't all through the years and all that kind of stuff that you've been doing. And obviously, a marriage had gone bad somewhere along the way, so
Right.
that's stressful leading up before you finally file for divorce. If anybody who's ever been divorced knows, that's not just suddenly it's stressful and then it's gone. It's stressful long before that.
Right, you got to get to that point. It
Yeah.
takes a lot.
Amen. And all of this is happening at one time. And oh, by the way, in addition to cancer and Lyme disease flare up and surgeries and a car accident that requires surgery on an ankle and a divorce all happening at once, there's the fact that the world is shut down because of COVID,
Right.
which is adding enormous stress to everybody's life through business, and as a musician, there's nowhere to play and all that kind of stuff. So this swirling mass is around you.
Yeah, losing all our tour dates on top of that. I think it was about the same time I'd had surgery. We found out that everything that I had worked for, to go on this massive tour last year, basically just got taken away
Yeah.
by COVID.
Again, through no fault of your own.
Exactly.
How did you keep going? What is it that kept you going? Because there is another small part of this that we'll get to in a second, that on top of all of this stuff that we'll get to in a second. So how did you keep going?
Well, honestly, I mean, my children are what keeps me going. I mean, you have to find something in life to live for. I think that's the most important thing I could tell people, and there always is something. For me, it's my children, and music, of course. I buried myself in music. I mean, that's basically what I did. I mean, at the time we were kind of dead in the water. I felt like losing our tour and everything, and then I don't know. All of a sudden, I just was like, I've got to put my energy somewhere, and it came out in writing songs.
Now, in addition to all of this other stuff, in the years leading up to this, Jennifer mentioned her children. Both of your children were preemies.
Yes, yeah. Dallas, my son, was born, oh gosh, February of 2004, so he's 17 now, and he was a 1 pound preemie, a micro preemie.
Oh, a
Yeah.
micro preemie.
Yes, very very tiny. Born at just below 23 weeks, and wasn't expected to make it. He was in the NICU most of that year, and has had so many surgeries. I don't even know if I can count them all right now, but he was trach till he was 10, feeding tube till he was 8. So I spent most of my 20s, caring for a child with
Right.
all these machines. So that was Dallas. And then Phoenix was later in life. She was 2 pounds, 13 ounces. So it's been a journey with them. They taught me a lot about
So
life.
the entire time you're trying to figure out this Lyme disease thing and battle it, you're having to take care of your son. Well, not the entire time, but throughout your 20s, you're taking care of your son, who's
Right.
a feeding tube and trach and all that, which has a tremendous amount of effort and responsibility that has to go with it.
Yeah, so the stress from
Yeah.
that was causing the Lyme disease to get worse and worse,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize I had it, of course.
Add on top of that a bad marriage.
Right.
And then as that continues to go downhill, we throw in cancer and a couple of car accidents and a couple of surgeries and all that kind of stuff. Oh, then COVID causes you to lose this tour that you've built an entire career working toward.
Right. Yeah.
And here you are today. New single out today. Is that right? Is it out?
Yes,
Just
today.
out today. From best album you've ever done,
Mhm.
with a bright musical future ahead of you. And hopefully all of this other stuff behind you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I'm finally coming out of everything, and I'm able to walk now, which is huge because
Yeah.
it's been a year of not being able to walk very well at all. And our tour's going on this summer, and I get to work with Eddie Z, who's amazing, and he's produced this incredible album. So I feel like all the work is paying off, but it's been a long road to get here.
How many people do you know that have been through as much as you've been through? Like everybody's been through something. Everybody's dealt with something. But this is an enormous amount of stuff for you to be able to not only keep going, but still thrive.
I don't know. I mean, and there's a lot, we won't touch on in this story because it's too personal. But yeah, I feel like it's been a lot, and I don't know that many people or anyone that I can think of really that's encountered that much stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they're out there, and I tell myself that all the time. I look at my son, and I think if he can go through all that, I can do anything. And that's what I tell myself. So I know there are other people out there suffering.
Well, let's talk about a couple of things coming up, but I want you to repeat something because I think it's the most important thing that you've said is that you found something to live for, your kids and your music. And then you said there's always something to live for.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you've just acquired? Is that something that was bred into you? Is that something you learned at an early age? Where does that philosophy come from? Because I agree with it 100%. And I've talked about that before, that, there's always something, there's always a reason to keep going. And those are two great reasons, obviously, your two kids to keep going. And then you add on the fact that you are an enormously talented musician. But where does that come from? Is that just clinging to what little bit you got? Or did you always believe like there's always a reason to keep going?
I've always believed that. I've been like that since I was a child, because I faced adversity then. But I tend to look at other people as much as I can, or inspiration from others when I can. And I think that's important for everyone. My father only had one arm and barely the use of a right leg, and he worked every day of his life, and while there are a lot of things I can say good and bad about anyone, my father worked really hard. He never let it get him down. And I always felt like he did that for his children, or he found purpose, so I feel like you always have to find purpose somewhere. And it's there. You just got to look for it.
So as you start to emerge from all of this stuff, it is a story of triumph over tragedy. Definitely. It is a story of a wonderful example of how you find something to hang on to and thrive because you doggedly hang on to that one thing that you believe in. And we'll get to that part of this next. Hang on.
There's more of the new Ace at Large podcast next.
The Ace and TJ family is always on your phone on the Papa John's Ace and TJ app. Available at the Apple App Store, Google Play, and Amazon Marketplace.
Welcome back to the new Ace at Large podcast.
15 years or so of battling Lyme disease. 2 children, both born prematurely. One who has to have a trach and a feeding tube until the age of 10. Cancer. A bad marriage. A couple of car accidents. Lots of surgeries involved. And here is Jennifer Lauren today with a brand new single out with her band Diamonds and Whiskey called Backcountry Voodoo that you can find available on all streaming platforms. A wonderful story of perseverance. A wonderful story of, like you said a minute ago, grabbing on to those things that mean so much to you. Maybe the only thing that you've got that's positive in your life, you find that one thing and you doggedly hang on to it and turn that into your reason to keep yourself going day after day after day after day after day. Do you feel like you are now, I don't want to be overly dramatic and, the phoenix rising from the ashes kind of a thing, but do you feel like life just now is beginning to get good, like really good? Like this is where it's gonna work itself out to where, you blossom, so to speak. I don't, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really how I feel right now. And I can't really describe it. I'm trying not to cry thinking about it, but I just feel like when you work so hard to get to some sort of normalcy, if you will, in life, and then that happens, and then great things start happening, which is what's happening now with music. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like all this weight's been lifted off of me.
When did music as a performer, when did music kind of come into your life?
Well, I started playing piano when I was 4, and I started singing around the age of 8. And, of course, I did the chorus thing, and then I played concert piano in high school and sang in all the choirs, then went on to college to do the same. And so really, I would say in high school, performance became a big thing for me. I thought I wanted to be on Broadway and was classically trained to sing opera, that sort of thing. Then life obviously took a different turn with Lyme disease and being too sick to do that. So it's something I always wanted to do. And when my son was well enough, after the trach came out and everything, I felt like finally I could focus on that and start writing music and playing. So that's kind of how I got back to it.
And I find that obviously people hear your story, and I think a lot of times people can just begin to get negative about themselves and about the world when they feel like everything's kind of keeping them down, when they never seem to catch that break. And they'll say things like to themselves, well, I don't, obviously, it's easy to hang on to music when you have a bunch of talent, you can write songs or that kind of thing. But everybody's got something, everybody's got something they can find to kind of hang on to, or just something to immerse themselves in. Maybe you're not a great singer or song. Maybe you like to read books or, whatever it might be. Maybe you've thought about being a writer. Maybe you're never going to write a novel, but you just write for yourself because it gives you a place to go to emotionally, mentally, that gives you a break. You know what I mean? Just some place to pour your heart into, because that's really all you need.
Right. Exactly. I have a friend like that. She's a writer, and she always wanted to be a writer, but she's not professionally, but that's what she does, and it's not easy. Even when you're talented or you think you have things going for you, it's not easy to hold on to things like that. All of us get down. All of us feel like doors are slammed in our faces, and it's not the easiest thing in the world. So whatever it is that you can find that you enjoy, you've got to cling to that, and you have to hold on to it, and you have to keep trying to do those things that make you happy.
How close have you ever come to giving up?
Oh, I've come pretty close. I mean,
Like,
there are
let's
some,
say, have you ever decided, you know what, I need to just give up on this music thing and just focus on staying home and just resting or something like that? You know what I mean?
I
Because
know,
it's a
yeah.
very busy schedule that you keep up even with all of this, which is very impressive.
Right. So I've never decided to do that, but there are times, days when I'm just exhausted and I feel like my body's not going to go on because I'm fighting this disease and I'm weak. I mean, I had one of those days last week where I just felt like I couldn't hold my head up, and I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't last long for me though. Honestly, next 30 minutes, I'm like, screw that. I refuse.
How important is it for you as an example to other women?
I would say it's probably the most important thing in my music. And I say it all the time, especially for moms and females that have went through similar things that I've went through, or even other things. I get up every day and I just want to be an example to other women that you can do this. Like whatever it is you're doing and you want to do, you can do it. I want my daughter to know that. I named her Phoenix for a reason, as you just mentioned. But I want her to know that no matter what she goes through in life, she can get through it on her own if she has to. She can do it. And I think that's the biggest message for me to other women is no matter what you've been through, and a lot of us are victims of a lot of different things, but you don't have to have that mentality. You can rise above, and you can inspire other people. And I think for me, that's another passion in my life. So I would want other women to know that they can do the same thing.
That is the exact reason I wanted to have you on the Ace at Large podcast, is because that is exactly why we are here doing this every week, is for people to know that very thing. And you are a fantastic example. Let's talk about the music for a minute. So the song's out today, Backcountry Voodoo. Explain the story, because it starts with the backstory starts with a tarot card reader.
Yeah.
And it's a, you would start out by saying, I think you would start out by saying it's a typical revenge song on a cheating guy, except this one takes a little bit of a different spin that makes it unique.
Right. Yeah. So it's a lot of truth mixed with a little fantasy, or at least that's what I say.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's your typical cheating song, or get my heart broke by a guy. But what if you could cast a spell and make him fall madly in love with you, so you could break his heart back? And that's basically what it's about. And I'm the turn the cheek kind of girl, so like I take things and I let them roll off my back most of the time. But not in this song. I was pretty angry when I wrote it. But I went to see a tarot card reader when I was recording my first album in Seattle. And that's where the idea from the song came from.
So again, the concept being he did her wrong, cheated, but if you cast a spell on him to make him fall back in love, then I can come back and break his heart.
Yeah.
And walk away the victor in the whole thing.
Exactly. So that he basically doesn't want to live without you. So, and it's funny how things like that end up happening even without the spell being cast. So the story again ended up being very truthful, but it, of course, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. So it comes from, like you said, it starts with some reality. Then you mix in a little fantasy in there, come up with a great song. Again, the single is Backcountry Voodoo. That's available everywhere today to stream. Go check it out, from Diamonds and Whiskey. But all of your music really starts with an element of truth. There's a kernel of truth in every story that kind of blossoms from there, right?
Right. Yeah. So I write from stories in my life, basically, and this whole next album that's coming out is just story after story, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to it.
Well, you've got plenty of stories. We've covered that part. So what about the album? When is the album due out?
Well, I think it's going to be later this year. We haven't set a date for it because we're going to release at least 3, maybe 4 singles off the record before we release the whole thing. So
that's such a unique and different way of doing things. Before you'd get one single for years, generations, the record business, where you'd get one single as a preview of what an album would sound like, and then an album comes out, and now half the album will be released as a single before the album ever actually comes out.
I know, it's weird. And a lot of people aren't even doing albums, and when I first went to Eddie Z and we did pre-pro and he was listening, because he's like, well, I don't encourage people to do whole albums anymore. Most people don't. But then when he listened, he was like, oh no, you have an whole album.
Yeah,
So,
you got enough songs.
yeah.
I've heard all these songs, and you got enough songs. And full disclosure, I've known Jennifer for a while, and been around some of the stuff that they're doing, and it's fantastic. And I like the fact that it is a little different than your typical female. It's female country classified, but it's not female country as in your typical female country music. It rocks, but the writing has an edge to it. A little bit of you get some of that classic country feel, but you also get stories like this that have a really unique twist on a classic tale that makes it seem and feel very different from anything else you've heard before. So it's got a very fresh sound to it as well. And you continue to write, and you mentioned you got a big tour coming up this summer.
Yeah, so we actually start playing in a couple weeks, and then we're in the Carolinas. I think the first few gigs, and we have Carolina Country Music Fest at the beach. That's with Luke Holmes, Eric Church, Darius Ruckers. That's going to be big for us. And then we head out west, and we're playing a bunch of fairs and festivals across the country.
And everything's all healed up, so you can get around the stage pretty well.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be in my stilettos yet, but I'll be up there jumping around.
All right. A couple of final thoughts that I really think are important that I want to share with you. Next.
There's more of the new Ace at Large podcast next. Welcome back to the new Ace at Large podcast.
You find something that makes it all worthwhile. No matter what it is you're up against, you find something that makes it all worthwhile, and you cling to that. And every day you wake up and you put one foot in front of the other, and eventually you get where you're going. It may take you a little longer than you anticipated. Pace may be a lot slower than you anticipated, but you will get there. And here with us today on the Ace at Large podcast is a living, breathing example of that. Jennifer Lauren from the band Diamonds and Whiskey. The single, Backcountry Voodoo, is out now. It is the first single, the lead single from the new album available sometime later this year, which is called Blonde Ambition. And as we mentioned a minute ago, not exactly sure when the album's coming out, but Backcountry Voodoo is out now. A unique take on a classic country tale, so to speak, and a unique sound. I think the sound is very different and unique as well. And I'll say this. One of the things from the songs that I have heard is that I don't like listening to somebody's album when all the songs sound the same. And I like the fact that when you listen to Diamonds and Whiskey stuff, every song is very different from the next, and it gives you a really well-rounded sound and a really good feel for all the stuff that you do.
Yeah. There's everything from traditional country to rock and roll, straight up rock and roll on this album. And then what we call swamp rock, which is kind of what Backcountry Voodoo lends to. And then you've got even some ragtime on the record. So a little bit of everything.
So as we wrap this up, this story that I find so fascinating of how you've tenaciously used your kids and music to give you something to hang on through Lyme disease and cancer and a bad marriage and car wrecks and COVID and all these other terrible things that have happened in your life, beginning from your very early childhood. It almost seems like your parents divorced when you were 2. And since then, it's been just like a string of bad things that have happened to you until the age you are now, which leaves you just now beginning to maybe be able to take a deep breath.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's
I don't want to overplay it, but it just seems
no,
like,
it's true. It's been a lot. I tend to, just be grateful for every good thing in life. And, Eddie Z and I talk about this a lot. When you go through that kind of adversity and things that are that bad, and when you're knocking on death's door, which I have, it makes you grateful for every moment, every single moment of every day. And that's pretty much how I live my life. Just thankful.
Wow. Because most people in your position going through the stuff that you've been through would not nearly be as grateful.
Oh, well, I think just being able to breathe. Every morning when I wake up, I'm just like, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to wake up.
Well, thank you for coming here today and sharing this story, because talking about it, and like I said before, it's the exact reason that we started doing this podcast in this format with this way. The point being to give everybody something each week to hang on to say, I can keep going. I can be better. Oh, this was a bad day, but tomorrow's going to be a better day, or a bad week, or a bad month, or a bad year, or a bad 30 years, whatever it might be, to give people something to help them keep going, and maybe a little story that inspires them to make it through the next few days. And I certainly think your story is one of those things.
Thank you for having me. It means a lot to me.
So go check out the single that's out today, streaming everywhere, Backcountry Voodoo from Diamonds and Whiskey. And I think Jennifer's story is phenomenal. And obviously it fits with the one thing that I leave you with here every week is that one day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now, and it will become someone else's survival guide. And I hope we've given you just a little bit of that survival guide today. We'll see you next week.
This is the new Ace at Large podcast. The new Ace at Large podcast will be back next Thursday.